The history of the YF-23 fighter aircraft, perhaps the most revolutionary in the history of aviation, is like a solid bestseller. There's a tough confrontation with a rival, a dramatic defeat, and going into the shadows for several decades in order to suddenly rise from the dead. Seemingly forgotten forever, rejected by U.S. military officials in 1990, YF-23, like the Phoenix bird, is now trying to revive. Of course, not in the same exact form, and not in their homeland, but in... Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. In 1991, the U.S. Air Force formulated requirements for a new fifth-generation jet fighter, the Advanced Frontline Fighter, ATF, to replace the F-15 Eagle. It was proposed to put all the latest breakthroughs in the new fighter, including advanced avionics, new digitally controlled engines, and it was also supposed to be stealthy for radars and multifunctional. Radar stealth is the main thing that should distinguish the fifth generation from the fourth. The Pentagon considered that it would be much wiser not to get involved in a dogfight, as the pilots call a close-range battle, but to sneak up on the enemy and hit it with a missile without even entering the radius of destruction of enemy weapons. In July 1986, the beginning of the competition for the design of the fifth-generation fighter was announced. In October of the same year, two teams were selected: Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Northrop McDonnell Douglas, which within 50 months were to create prototypes of the new fighter, which were designated YF-22 for Lockheed and YF-23 for Northrop. By 1986, each team had rolled out two prototype aircraft to the airfield. Northrop offered the following prototypes: the dark gray PAV-1 Spider, which featured a Black Widow Spider on the fuselage. The prototype took off in June 1990. The second prototype of the PAV-2, Gray Ghost, was light gray, which took off in October of the same year. The PAV-1 Spider used the same Pratt & Whitney F-119 turbofan engine found in the YF-23, and which later will be installed on the F-22 Raptor. The PAV-2 Gray Ghost was equipped with a General Electric YF-120 engine, which could switch between turbojet and turbofan modes to improve fuel consumption characteristics at low and high speeds, respectively. The winner of this competition has long been known. This is the YF-22, later reborn in the F-22 Raptor, the first serial fifth-generation fighter. Before analyzing why this happened, we'll describe the little-known but no less outstanding offspring of Northrop, the YF-23 aircraft. Its appearance is mesmerizing, even now. Although our eyes have long been accustomed to the futuristic images of fifth-generation fighters, the aesthetics of the machine are mesmerizing. The YF-23, unofficially called the Black Widow, had an integrated aerodynamic design. That is, the lift was provided not only by the wings, but by the fuselage itself. A diamond-shaped mid-wing with cut-off tips and a V-shaped tail. The body of the aircraft turned out to be more elongated compared to the YF-22, but noticeably thinner. In this, it resembles the SR-71, a strategic supersonic reconnaissance aircraft, the fastest mass-produced aircraft in the world. Thanks to the elongation of the fuselage, the developers were able to push the two engines of the Black Widow deeper so that their nozzles did not protrude beyond the general contour of the aircraft. And this is a huge plus in terms of infrared visibility. But at the same time, the nozzles were not rotatable. That is, the aircraft did not have a variable thrust vector. But the Black Widow had a noticeably high cruising speed, Mach 1.8, and this is without the use of an afterburner. Then, as the YF-22 showed, only Mach 1.58 and only on afterburner. Also in the flight test report of these two prototypes, it said that the YF-22 had less radar signature. So why did the U.S. military prefer the YF-22 over the YF-23? Of course, we can only speculate. First, lack of controllable thrust vector. This means that the YF-22 was a more maneuverable aircraft. Plus, the elongated fuselage of the Black Widow also does not look like an advantage in this sense in comparison with the sturdy YF-22. Even at a quick glance at the latter, he looks like a born air fighter who's perfect for close air combat. But there was a concept that a fifth-generation fighter would not engage in close combat. Obviously, the air fleet generals at the time had not yet been able to completely reorganize to a new concept, and in their heads, maneuverability seemed to be the most important factor in air battles of the 21st century. In addition, the YF-22 looked significantly more conservative in comparison with the truly revolutionary Black Widow. U.S. military is not characterized by British conservatism, as well as the desire to save money on military development. However, no one likes extra risk either, especially when there's a much simpler and more understandable option. The factor of the developer's company also played a role. Perhaps it was this factor that was the stone that tipped the scales in favor of the YF-22 and put an end to the Black Widow. On the one hand, Northrop had by that time vast experience in creating stealth aircraft. After all, it was created by the famous Flying Wing, the strategic bomber B-2. But their competitors, Lockheed, by the time the YF-22 was built, had already created stealth. They were the creator of the F-117 Nighthawk. But in our opinion, something else turned out to be more important here. By the time the competition was summed up, many Northrop specialists were completely absorbed in issues related to the B-2, the most complex combat aircraft of its time, and also the most expensive in the world. The military reasoned, sensibly, that if these specialists also take on the development of the YF-23 fighter, they will simply be overburdened. And in the end, neither the B-2 will be brought to its full perfection, and the development of the YF-23 will fail. And this is already undermining the country's defense capability. As a result, in 1990, the choice was made in favor of the YF-22. At the same time, eyes were closed to the fact that the YF-23 provided a long flight at supersonic speed without using the afterburner mode, while the YF-22 did not. But this requirement was also one of the keys in the ATF program. As you know, in 2005, the F-22 entered service. It soon became clear that the F-22 Raptor was not exactly what America needed at the moment. Yes, the plane turned out to be excellent. Very low radar signature, the ability to hit air and ground targets, being unnoticed and without entering the range of enemy weapons. But all this had to pay a high price, in the truest sense of the word. The Raptor alone cost a whopping $379.5 million, including the development costs. Plus the huge cost of an hour of operation, over $58,000. Just by not flying for an hour on this airplane, you could save enough for the coolest Tesla Model 3. In addition, at supersonic speed without afterburner, the F-22 Raptor can fly for only 6 minutes or 180 kilometers. In the first years of this century, America was the only country that could afford to design and create a fifth-generation fighter. But the world is changing rapidly. Other countries are already on their heels. Russia, Su-57, China, J-20, and another one, J-31, is on the way. And it suddenly brought to life the seemingly long-buried YF-23 project. If something is done really well, it won't be forgotten. But the YF-23 will be revived in Japan. This country, seeing that its sworn friends, Russia and China, had such a formidable weapon, wanted to have it as well. So in the land of the rising sun, there was an ambitious program to create its own stealth fighter, F-3. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries has been appointed the lead developer. Of course, Japan, as one of the strategic military allies of the United States outside of NATO, has US F-35s, but the Japanese military obviously know about the shortcomings, problems with stealth coating, insufficient thrust-to-weight ratio, lack of supersonic speed without afterburner, as well as U.S. officials at the Pentagon. After all, the same Russian Su-57s, thanks to their new engines, which produce 38 tons of thrust combined, can safely